Christians and atheists always say there's moral problems with the Prophet Muhammad, because the Prophet Muhammad did polygamy, fought in wars, etc., etc. Well, the problem is the critics who say this are very inconsistent because, uh, if you read the Bible, if you read the Old Testament, whatever Prophet Muhammad did, it's also found in the Bible, or it's also found in biblical prophets. And the reason why Christians can't sweep this under the rug or ignore this is because the Bible or the New Testament itself seems to be promoting whatever the Old Testament prophets did. All the morally problematic things, the morally problematic things the biblical prophets did. Let's take a look at David. David is seen as a man after God's heart. It would be hard to find anyone in the Bible that God liked more than David. For example, David was selected by God to be the king, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 10 to 13. David's heart was perfect with the Lord, and the Lord of hosts was with him. 2 Samuel chapter 5, verse 10, 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 4, 1 Kings chapter 15, verse 3. David walked in God's ways and kept his statutes in 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 14. So we see that King David or Prophet David is greatly praised in the Bible, not only in the Old Testament but in the New Testament too. In the New Testament, in Acts chapter 13, verse 22, David was, according to Acts of the Apostles, a man after God's heart. So David is also seen as a prophet according to the New Testament. If you read Acts of the Apostles, David is seen as a prophet. A prophet is someone who speaks on behalf of God. So what kind of person is David? So if we want to know what type of person God likes according to the Bible, according to both the Old and New Testaments, we need to only look at what David did according to the Old Testament. Those who believe in the Bible should try hard to imitate David, who always asked themselves, what would David do in a particular situation? So David, according to the Bible, Prophet David or King David is seen as a man after God's heart and a man who did whatever God wanted him to do, as we see in Acts of the Apostles and 2 Samuel chapter 5 verse 10, 1 Kings chapter 11 verse 4. It says David walked in God's ways in 1 Kings chapter 3 verse 14. So let's see what David did. David killed Goliath in 1 Samuel chapter 17 verse 51 to 50. 1 Samuel chapter 17 verse 51 to 57. David killed 200 Philistines. In 1 Samuel chapter 18 verse 25 to 27. He and Saul had a contest to see who can kill the most people for God, and the women really sung the praises in 1 Samuel chapter 18, 1 Samuel chapter 18 verses 6 to 7. Our women really praised these types of deeds, the women around them. He went out and fought with the Philistines and slew them with great slaughter. 1 Samuel chapter 19 verse 8. He acts crazy in 1 Samuel chapter 21 verse 12. He vows to kill any that pissed against the wall. 1 Samuel chapter 27 or 1 Samuel chapter 25 verse 22 to 34. David killed men and women. 1 Samuel chapter 27 verse 8 to 11. David had many wives. 1 Samuel chapter 30 verse 15. 1 Samuel chapter 30 verse 5. Prophet David or King David is said to have eight wives and 10 concubines. He tells one of the young men to kill an Amalek messenger. 2 Samuel chapter 1 verse 15. He kills people in 2 Samuel chapter 3 verse 27 to 29. Let's see what else. He says that whoever kills the lame and blind will be his chief and captain. 2 Samuel chapter 5 verse 8. He asks God if he should kill more Philistines. God says yes. and and God will help. So God and David smote the Philistines again. 2 Samuel chapter 5 verse 19 and 25. Uh, he kills 2/3 of the Moabites and makes the rest slaves. He cripples the captured horses. 2 Samuel chapter 8 verse 2 to 4. He kills and tortures thousands of people, and the Lord preserved David wheresoever he went. 2 Samuel chapter 8 verse 6 to 14. He commits adultery with Bathsheba, and she conceives and bears a son, which God later kills to punish David. 2 Samuel chapter 11 verse 2 to 5. Let's see here. He hacks, burns, and saws to death the people of several cities. 2 Samuel chapter 12 verse 31. He only David only David tries to get some heat by having some virgin girl minister to him in 1 Kings chapter 1 to 14. Uh, let's see here. He shows unusual restraint and went not into his concubines, and said he imprisons them as a punishment for being raped by David's son Absalom in 2 Samuel chapter 20 verse 3. Let's see here. What else? So basically, like, look at all the things David did according to the Bible. He did a lot of things that we would consider morally wrong, but uh my point is, like, David is seen as a man after God's heart according to the Bible, according to 1 Samuel, according to Acts of the Apostles, 1 Kings, etc., and the verses are right there. uh so how can David be so why are Christians condemning the Prophet Muhammad's morality, or why are atheists and Christians saying Prophet Muhammad's immoral because he did this, he did that, yada yada yada? And why are they ignoring the Bible? Because whatever the Prophet Muhammad did, Prophet David already did thousands of years before Muhammad was even born. So why are Christians criticizing the morals or the behavior of Muhammad when the Bible seems to allow these things, or the Bible seems to praise these things like polygamy, fighting wars, etc., etc.? So whatever the Prophet Muhammad did matches whatever Prophet David or King David did. Thus, the Prophet Muhammad cannot be a false prophet given any kind of moral issues, or there is no moral issues. There are no moral issues with the Prophet Muhammad according to the biblical standards, because whatever the Prophet Muhammad did, prophets in the Bible did the same thing or worse things. Because there's no records of Prophet Muhammad killing innocent women or killing innocent children, but David did these things. And the Prophet Muhammad's wars were in self-defense, while David's wars were offensive wars that God allowed him to do, or the God of the Bible allowed him to do. If Christians are criticizing the Prophet Muhammad for having many wives, well, King David or Prophet David also had many wives in 1 Samuel chapter 30 verse 5, etc., etc. So I just want to point out the inconsistency or the hypocrisy of Christians and atheists who criticize the Prophet Muhammad's morals or behavior, because whatever the Prophet Muhammad did, prophets in the Bible did the same thing, or they did worse things. And of course, these Christians and atheists don't tell us the whole story, or they just want to point the finger at Islam. But what they don't realize is that three fingers are pointing back at them, because according to the Bible, whatever the Prophet Muhammad did, you can find it in the Bible. Nothing the Prophet Muhammad did is unique. Everything the Prophet Muhammad did, it's found in biblical prophets already did it. David did polygamy. Solomon did polygamy. Abraham did polygamy. David fought wars. Moses fought wars, etc., etc. So you see, my point is that the Christians and the atheists are horribly inconsistent when it comes to criticizing the Prophet Muhammad's morality or his behavior, because they're ignoring the Bible. We're all pointing the finger at Islam, but they can't do that if they're being consistent and if they're being honest. But you don't find a lot of consistency, and you find a lot of these critics of Islam being hypocritical or inconsistent. So this is just what I just want to inform people about, is the hypocrisy or the inconsistency of Christian apologists and atheist critics of Islam when they criticize the morals and behavior of the Prophet Muhammad. Whatever Prophet Muhammad did, just look at what the Bible says, or look at what Prophet David did, and you'll see that David and Muhammad are people that the biblical God approves because they did whatever God wanted them to do. Whether it seems immoral or moral to us, this is the way of God. And Jews, Christians, and Muslims believe in the divine command theory, that we get our morals from God and not from human opinion. Stay tuned, more videos coming up ahead.